Synthesizers are fake and boring and they ruin music. That's how a lot of people think or speak about synthesizers. It's always framed like this great loss, as if we had something really warm and human and real and organic, and then it just became really cold and calculated and way too electronic. But that opinion ignores the biggest advantage that synthesizers gave musicians in a long time, and that was control. Before we had polyphonic synthesizers everywhere, you had to get a host of people involved in the same room together to get a lush sound. If you wanted a big choir, if you wanted a big string section, a big horn section, you had to get all of those people in. And every time you record a take, there's slight differences, people are off, there's a different kind of timing. There's all kinds of little things that get in the way of a perfect take, although some might say that's the charm. But what the polyphonic synthesizer enabled musicians to do was to have the exact same performance of that part every single time. For producers working in R&B and soul, for the first time, they were able to hold the harmony with this synth part and allow the feeling, the groove, the organic aspects of the track to breathe by bringing in humans. And you had this pairing that created some of the best music we've ever heard. You can hear this in some of the early Stevie Wonder stuff. Now, Stevie was always wanting to use cutting edge technology in his music. Obviously, no one doubted that he had soul. But you listen to something like the bass line on Boogie on Reggae Woman, that really bouncy, elastic sounding Moog bass. No one doubts that that feels like it's played by a human. It's organic, it has groove, it has feeling, but it's controlled. The tone never changes. When you have a bass player, the positioning moves. There's potential for so many different imperfections along the way. The synth bass stays the same. And then you think about something like Ain't Nobody, Shaka Khan. That little synth arpeggio, not an arpeggio, that little synth ostinato stays the same through the entire track. That's kind of like, in a way, acting like the pocketed drum beat. That's the thing that is locked in, and everything else around that ostinato is what's giving the track life. For these musicians and artists, a synthesizer wasn't an excuse not to have to hire someone. The synthesizer had a specific role within the timbre of a track, and it wasn't always the same. These guys knew that all of these different tools that they had at their disposal, whether they were synthetic or real or organic, they all had a specific sound, and the best music would come from using all of them in a way that complemented each other, not just as some brand shiny new piece of tech that they could stick in the middle of a track somewhere to make it sound like they were futuristic. These things had real purpose. The synthesizer kind of disciplined arrangement. When you had something that was locked in like that Ain't Nobody synth in the middle of the production, it allowed you to know where your boundaries were, where your drums and your other keys and your Rhodes and your backing vocals could lie around that central ostinato. And that part never had to fight for attention. It was always there. You hear it in the beginning when all the other elements are stripped away, but as the track goes on, you almost kind of just feel it subconsciously. You don't actually consciously hear it. And this is something that we've tried to emulate in one of our more recent tracks for our band, where we have these Juno-style synth brass parts that are contrasting with real brass parts. And they're functionally doing the same thing, they're ornamentation, but they sound different and they're bouncing off each other in a way that you can't really get if you just use synths or just use horns. It's about giving the horns the space to exist over here and being able to perform that lick, and giving the synth player the space to do his thing here, and it being a self-contained part. And that's what synthesizers gave to all of these producers in the 70s and the 80s, the chance to lock in a central or peripheral part of the track and let the feeling, the groove, the expression exist separately elsewhere around it. You could control the sound never changed. This aspect of the track literally stayed there. The soul of the tracks isn't removed by this synth. The soul is now in the timing, in the phrasing, in the harmonies. It's in everything else around that locked-in component. And that's why the great records from the 70s and 80s that used all of this new tech didn't make it sound robotic or forced or overly avant-garde. They used these machines intentionally, and the organic elements were able to live with them really nicely.